you go back quite a lot?
Hello, 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 welcome back to Jen's Books. How are you doing? In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my trip to the British Library and my own work as a writer. I'm also going to talk a bit about books that I'm drawn to in autumn. It definitely feels as though, we're in autumn now, although it's been a bit unseasonably hot this week, so I'm kind of regretting the sweater choice already. But I just can't resist it. I love autumn. I don't know about you, it's one of my absolute favourite times of the year. Give me pumpkin spice everything, that is what I say. So first of all, I wanted to mention I went to a trip to the British Library this week. This is an amazing tote bag that I bought. How awesome is this with the owls on? Could not resist. And I went along to do a training course, and one of the things I've been asked about by some of my subscribers is my own work as a writer. So I thought I might use it as a bit of an opportunity to tell you a bit more about what I do before I go on to talk about books. So I'm currently working on a PhD. I'm putting together a collection of poetry that's based in the northwest of England. So it's about place, and it's also through the lens of traumascapes, so places where really difficult things and tragedies have taken place, mostly ones in living memory that are less sort of discussed in the media. So that's the aim, and that's one of the reasons I went down to the British Library was to do a session in oral history, which was incredibly helpful. In terms of my own writing, I've been writing poetry for a long time. I've been lucky to be published in quite a few different places, and I have a little collection coming out next year, which I'll tell you about more when I have a proof copy to show you. So poetry is really my thing. I also write short stories, and I've had quite a few short stories and things published as well. So that's kind of me. I teach creative writing as well. I've done that for about 20 years. So I'm really, really obsessed with books and writing just generally, hence this channel as an opportunity to discuss my reads with you. If you have any questions about about what I'm doing, then do ask. I'm always happy to sort of share a bit, but I know that this channel is really about book recommendations, so let's get down to it. So when I went down to the British Library, they have two bookshops there, which you'll know is a bit of a red flag to me. Money had to be spent. So when I went in, I picked up these British Library collections, and these are collections of short stories that have been edited by various different writers and lecturers in the UK. So the first one I picked up was Owl Haunted Shores, Tales from the Coast of the British Isles, and this is a British Library collection, and this is edited by Emily Alder, Jimmy Packham and Joan Passy. And this is a collection of short stories spanning over 2 centuries about the British Isles and the coastline. So that it's got folk tales and it's got fairy tales and ghost stories and all sorts of things in it. And the blurb says, "The sea that night sang rather than chanted. All along the far running shore a rising tide dropped thick foam, and the waves, white crested, came steadily with a swing of deliberate purpose. From foreboding cliffs and no-nute lighthouses to rumbling shingles and silted estuaries, the coast of the British Isles have stoked the imaginations of storytellers for millennia, lending a rich literary significance to these spaces between land and sea. For those who choose to explore these shores, generations of ghosts, sea spirits, fairies and tentacle monsters come and go with the tide." This new collection of 15 short stories, 6 folk tales and 4 poems ranges from 1789 to 1933, offering a chilling tour of the coasts of Great Britain, Ireland and the Isle of Man, including haunted pieces by Frances Hodgson Burnett, Bram Stoker and Charlotte Riddle. So this interested me straight away, because a lot of the places I'm writing about are on the coastline, and I'm thinking not only about the tragedies that I'm writing about, but also other events and mythology that have taken place in those locations. So I picked this one up straight away. The second one I picked up is sort of a similar theme really. It's called Weird Woods, Tales from the Haunted Forests of Britain, and it's edited by John Miller. And the blurb says, "Woods plays a crucial and reoccurring role in horror, fantasy, the gothic and the weird. Tick, 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 yes please. There are places in which strange things happen, where it's easy to lose your way. Supernatural creatures thrive in the thickets. Trees reach into the underground of pagan myth and magic, forests are full of ghosts. Lining the path through this realm of folklore and fear are 12 stories from across Britain, telling stories of whispering voices and maddening sights from deep in the Yorkshire Dales to the ancient hills of Gwent and the eerie quiet of the forests of Dartmoor. Immerse yourself in this collection of classic tales, celebrating the enduring power of our natural spaces to enthrall and terrorise our senses. So again, this was a book that I thought might inform my my own writing and my own research, but also, you know, couldn't resist. It's just, I love the Gothic, and the covers on these books as well, I just thought were really gorgeous. The third one I picked up was Mortal Echoes, Encounters with the Dead, and that's edited by Greg Boswell. And it's spanning 2 centuries. Mortal Echoes features some of the finest writers in the English language, including Daphne du Maurier, Edgar Allan Poe, Graham Greene and H.G. Wells. Intriguing, unsettling and often darkly humorous, this collection explores transient existence and what it means to be alive. And there are some really well-known writers in here. And I love Edgar Allan Poe, I love Daphne du Maurier. And as I was picking out these books, and as I say, I couldn't resist them, partly because they're clearly sort of gothic and they're sort of uncanny and weird collections. But it made me think about why I was drawn to those, particularly at this time of the year. I often find in autumn I want to read sort of spooky and sort of darker stories. And that was one of the reasons I picked those 3 books up. So what do I like to read this time of year? Autumn talks to me of 3 things really. It talks to me of classic text. I always find myself reaching for a classic novel. I always look for something with a haunted house, and I also think of things that have got fairy tales. So those sort of 3 things really tend to come forward in my lists of reading. And I'm very much a mood reader. So at the moment I'm working my way through the book along list, but I'm getting drawn back to the sort of gothic writing. So what I'm going to do is, in the description for this video, I'll put a link to my Gothic list of Gothic Reads videos, because I've gone through a lot of the books that I'm drawn to at this time of year in those 2 books, and I didn't want to repeat those suggestions, but I thought I'd talk about a few others that I haven't mentioned or haven't mentioned as much on this channel as recommendations for things that might interest you. So first of all, I mentioned sort of the classic novels and things that I'm generally drawn to at this time of the year, things like The Crucible, the play by Arthur Miller, which was written in 1953, which talks about the Salem witch trials. I might read Jane Eyre, which was written in 1847 by Charlotte Bronte. So I'm drawn to sort of those darker but historical novels that have been around with us for quite a long time. So the one I thought I'd mention in this particular video is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, which is seen as one of the sort of classic American novels, and it was published in 1850, so it's definitely a classic in terms of the age, and it follows the lives of a community of Puritans between 1642 and 1649 in rural Massachusetts. And our heroine is a lady called Hester Prynne, and when she is pregnant and delivers a child that isn't her husband is missing, presumed dead, she's hauled up in front of the community and she ends up spending some jail term. And when she comes out, she's then made to wear a red A for adultery on her clothing, but she refuses to say who the father is. Spoiler alert, we do find out in the book. But so there's a bit of a mystery, and alongside this, her husband, who is presumed missing, actually sees all of this going on, changes his name and vows to find the man who has done this to his wife. So it's a classic novel. There's lots of twists and turns in it, and as this is exactly the sort of thing I'm wanting to read as the nights draw in, something a bit mysterious and with a bit of age. The second category I talked about was sort of fairy tale and folklore, and a book that I read last year which I really enjoyed is Juniper and Fawn by Ava Reid. It's not a book that I've mentioned on the channel before, so I thought it would be nice to speak about it here. This is a gothic novel. There are some trigger warnings about sexual abuse. So if that's something that you don't want to touch, that's absolutely fair enough. You might not want to read this book. But it's about a young witch called Marlin Chen and her two sisters who live with their father, who is this renowned wizard. And they're basically held prisoner in the house. Each of the three sisters has a different gift. So one of them can see into the future. One of them is a herbalist and creates cures for visitors who come and pay money for them. And then we have Marlin Chen, who is able to read people by touching their bodies, so she knows their secrets. And so people come to the girls and they pay to have these skills used to help them. But they are unable to leave, and there's all sorts of enchantments on the house and the grounds as well. But one night the three sisters escape to go and see a show in the town, and Marlin Chen falls in love with a dancer. So it throws everything kind of uh in disarray, but at its core it's about this young woman who's trying to escape her overbearing father. It's about sisterhood and it's about magic, and it's really gothic. The prose is really rich and just beautifully written, enchanting. So including, excuse the pun. So it's one that I definitely recommend. I really enjoyed this. It kind of recalled a little bit that sort of magic realism that I enjoy in other novels, but very much that feeling of folklore and fairy tale living in this book. So definitely recommend that. So that's Juniper and Fawn by Ava Reid, and I'd really love to know if anybody's read this, what your thoughts were on it. Lastly, I talked about historical books and unhaunted house books. Historical books, I mean, I mentioned books that were written a long time ago, but also anything that's sort of bizarre and slightly carnivalistic. So I wanted to mention Jamrach's Menagerie by Carol Birch, which I don't think I mentioned before, but I really love this book. Really enjoyed it. This was off a booker list at some point. It was published in 2011 by Carol Birch. She's written all sorts of stuff, so there's a back catalogue as well if you're interested, and gorgeous cover as well to the book with the tiger. And this story is about a character called Jaffe, who when he's 8 encounters an escaped tiger from Jamrach's menagerie, and the tiger very gently picks him up in his jaws and walks off with him. He's eventually rescued by none other than Jamrach himself, who offers him a job. So he goes to work for the menagerie alongside another young boy called Tim, and there becomes sort of a bit of a competitive friendship. They're very close, but there's competition between them as they grow up on the streets. And then eventually Jamrach sends them abroad to the East Indies to capture a dragon, and everything sort of cuts loose and goes very badly wrong very quickly. So we're talking about monsters, we're talking about shipwrecks, we're talking about exotic animals and regrets and betrayals, and it's just a really beautiful book, and I really enjoyed it. Lots of twists and turns, and exactly the sort of dark kind of gothic and slightly strange read that I like to read at this time of the year. Lastly, I talked about haunted house books. I love a haunted house book. I love it. So one book that I reread probably most autumns is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, but I've spoken about that before, my love of Shirley Jackson, so I didn't want to go into too much detail there. Also short stories by Daphne du Maurier, I really love. They're always really creepy. And the one I sort of have mentioned before but I wanted to mention again was The Apparition Phase by Will McLean. It's one that's not talked about as much as some of the others that I generally talk about. Also Mexican Gothic I really loved. So there are loads of fantastic books, and anything by Grady Hendrix as well. Actually, he writes sort of comedy horror, which not only makes me chortle, I just really enjoy them. I'm currently listening to the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which was published in 2020, so I will talk about that in a future video. But I've sort of spoken about his books before, and they're quite enjoyable if you like kind of silly, over the top horror. I definitely recommend those. But the Apparition Phase even was published in 2020, and this is a haunted house book. It's about some twins called Abby and Tim who fake a ghost picture. It's based in the 70s, which is when a lot of that sort of classic ghost hunting started to take place. And they faked this ghost picture, and and then not long afterwards, Abby disappears. So Will's dealing with the disappearance of his sister, and also the risk that maybe they called for something that they didn't mean to, and he becomes part of a team of ghost hunters, and it's about that journey and the experiences. So I really enjoyed this. It gave me those his sort of historical 1970s vibes, although it's written in obviously the 2020s, sorry, 2020. So those are some recommendations. As I say, also another one, Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward, which was published in 2021. I could go on, but you get the idea. Historical novels, fables and witchcraft hex is also an amazing book, which I'll talk about in another video, and also sort of the haunted house books. But hopefully those are some recommendations. As I say, I'll put some links into my previous videos about gothic fiction. I don't know what it is about this time of the year. It isn't just about Halloween, but I'm just really drawn to those sorts of texts. But I'd love to know if you know what you're reading at the moment. Are you reading something gothic or something completely different to try and keep that summer going? And have you read any of these books, or do you have any suggestions based on those? But for now, I shall say ta-ra. I shall get back to my book, and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care.